As the fire smoldered around him, a baby lion sat motionless in the ashes, his fur scorched, his paws raw, but he refused to leave. He wasn't trapped. He was guarding something buried beneath the rubble. What they found left even seasoned rescuers in tears. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The air stank of scorched pine, melted plastic, and the unmistakable tang of burned meat, the terrible cocktail of human negligence. Charred remnants of nylon tents flapped in the breeze like torn flags of surrender. Around them, the forest had been transformed into a graveyard of blackened trunks and white ash, the sky above veiled in a sickly amber hue. It was a hellscape, and yet, in the center of it all, that cub, no larger than a retriever, sat rooted like a sentinel of sorrow. Blake stepped forward slowly, his boots crunching through brittle sticks and embers that still glowed with residual life. Every instinct told him not to get too close. A lion, even this young, was still a predator. But this one didn't posture, didn't growl, didn't blink. It just watched him, head low, ribs shivering with exhaustion, its breath coming in sharp, shallow pulls. The cub's golden coat was streaked with soot and ash, the fur on its legs curled and singed, the pads of its paws cracked open like desert earth after drought. He crouched at a distance, feeling the sweat pool under his fire-retardant collar, the heat pressing against him from all sides. "He's not running," he murmured to Jenna, who stood frozen a few paces behind, eyes wide with a cocktail of awe and disbelief. "No," she said. "He's holding vigil." Blake felt a chill roll over him despite the heat. The cub's posture wasn't defensive. It was devotional. Its eyes flicked briefly toward a charred circle in the soil behind it, then back to him. That's when he saw the faint indentations. Not just one set of paw prints, but two. The second smaller, lighter, half obscured by ash. A broken line of soot where something had been dragged or crawled. The cub shifted slightly and let out a low, rasping chuff. Not a threat. Not a call for help. It was a sound Blake had only ever heard once before. From a grieving wolf mother they'd found pacing beside her dead pups on a frozen ridge 2 winters ago. It was mourning. His throat tightened. This was no simple rescue. This was a ceremony. A child of the wild had returned to the fire, not out of confusion, but out of refusal. Refusal to abandon whatever bond still burned, unseen, in that scorched earth. And Blake, for all his experience, could only kneel in silence and bear witness. The fire had long since passed, but its echo still lived in the earth. Every step stirred memories, ash drifting upward like the remnants of lost prayers. Blake kept his posture low, shoulders relaxed, voice carefully modulated to soothe, not command. But the cub didn't care for his tone, or his presence. It bared its teeth in a hoarse, cracked snarl and limped defiantly back toward the burned-out circle, its paw leaving behind a trail of red-black smudges on the cinder. The gesture wasn't fear, it was defiance. A wounded lion cub had drawn a line, one Blake had no right to cross. Behind him, Jenna crouched, squinting through the smoke and heat shimmer. Her gloved fingers sifted through the debris with delicate precision, and then stilled. A glint of metal caught the dull morning light, warped, half-melted, misshapen. A collar buckle, not the kind a wild cub would wear. "Not his," she muttered. "Blake, it's too small." He turned, following her gaze. The pieces fell into place like a trap springing shut. Another cub. Lighter. Younger. Gone. And the baby lion, this fierce, blistered survivor, had refused to leave the ashes that held its twin. Time bent in that moment. The chaos of the fire forgotten. The shouts from other teams muffled by the crackle of scorched memory underfoot. Blake's eyes locked with the cub's,
Two creatures that couldn't speak the same language but understood the same pain. Loss. The kind that doesn't scream but anchors itself in the bones. He reached again, slower now, not to grab or command, but simply to acknowledge. The cub didn't move, didn't retreat. It just stood there, between him and the place where something precious had ended. It had nothing left. No parent, no pack, no future it could understand. And still, it would not turn its back on the last thing it had loved. Blake raised the radio, the weight of it suddenly too heavy for his fingers. "This isn't a pickup," he said quietly. "This is a grieving ground. He's not resisting. He's remembering." A pause. "Prep the crate, but don't rush. He won't be carried out like cargo." Jenna looked at him, and for once, said nothing. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of loss and scorched soil. The cub stood unmoving, a broken statue etched into a battlefield of ash. And the man who'd come to rescue him now waited, unsure who was saving whom. The enclosure was silent except for the slow, rhythmic hum of the cooling units and the faint scuff of Ember's claws against concrete. His coat, still patchy with ash despite repeated efforts to clean him, bore the physical record of everything he'd survived and refused to let go of. Sedation had dulled his fight, but it hadn't erased it. Even drugged, he had twisted from their arms, driven not by instinct, but by a will so focused it felt human. Every motion, every cry, every flash of those amber eyes, it all spoke to something deeper than trauma. At Wild Edge Sanctuary, the staff had seen bears with shattered legs, hawks with shredded wings, elk half-eaten by barbed wire. But they had never seen grief like this. They'd named him Ember for the heat he came from, and for the way his presence still seemed to smolder, low, aching, unresolved. For 2 days, he didn't touch his food, didn't acknowledge the padded den, the warmed blanket, the calming sounds they played through hidden speakers. He lay facing the corner of his enclosure, tail twitching, nose pressed against the steel grate like he was waiting for something he hadn't finished. On the 3rd day, Jenna stepped past the usual protocol. No vet approved it. No book recommended it. But she went back to the fire zone, sifted through the soot until her glove split open, and found it. A piece of bark blackened but intact, still faintly reeking of smoke. She brought it back, hands trembling, heart caught somewhere between hope and guilt. She placed it on the floor of Ember's enclosure and stepped back. He moved immediately, not cautiously, not with fear, with recognition. He limped to the bark, sniffed it once, twice. Then he lowered himself beside it, curling his frail body around it like a child clinging to a lost sibling's shirt. The staff didn't speak. They didn't need to. Some looked away. Some cried openly. Blake stared through the reinforced glass and didn't blink for a long time. Then, a week later, in the wreckage, the final piece surfaced. Buried beneath half a foot of ash and collapsed debris, a firefighter brushed aside cinders and found something small. Cloth. Fibrous. Melted. A toy lion. Flattened. Scorched. Its button eyes turned to charcoal. A name tag hung half-melted from its neck. To Leo, love always, Jax. The realization came like a punch to the chest. Ember hadn't lost a sibling. He had lost a friend, a human, a boy, and he had stayed in the fire not to protect another cub, but to stand guard over the last thing that smelled like love. The glass case stood like a reliquary, simple, reverent, and heartbreakingly quiet. Inside it, the toy lion rested on a bed of white linen, its fur singed and misshapen, its once bright eyes melted into ink-black pools. The name tag,
though partially warped by heat, still bore the fading scrawl. To Leo, love always, Jax. It was a child's farewell gift, a promise, a tether. When Ember was brought back from morning observation, something in him changed the moment he saw it. No sound escaped him, no growl, no cry. He just approached, as if pulled, one cautious step, then another, and then his nose gently touched the cool surface of the glass. He stayed there, unmoving, for nearly 5 full minutes. No trainer interrupted, no camera flashed. Even the sanctuary staff, hardened by years of exposure to injury, survival, and loss, kept their distance, sensing the sacredness of the moment. His tail flicked, once, slow and deliberate. A sign not of agitation, but of presence. That night he ate. By morning he was pacing again, not anxiously, but with purpose. He inspected the corners of his enclosure, sniffed the leaves brought in for enrichment, engaged with a hanging rope that had hung untouched for days. The light returned to his movement, not playfulness, not yet, but agency, ownership. They didn't say it aloud, but everyone at Wild Edge knew. Something had returned to him. Not just will, but permission to heal, to move forward. The memorial plaque went up a week later, just outside the sanctuary's front gates, beneath the shadow of an old cedar tree that had somehow survived the blaze. Jenna carved the inscription herself. He didn't forget, neither will we. Within days, word spread. Visitors trickled in from nearby counties, then from across the state. A photo taken by a sanctuary volunteer, Ember curled beside the glass case, eyes half closed, paw lightly pressed against the wall, went viral. The comments poured in like prayers. This broke me. We don't deserve animals. That cub held on to love better than most people I know. Some came just to see him. Others brought toys, letters, flowers. A few wept openly, not just for Ember, but for what he symbolized: grief, loyalty, resilience, and the silent bravery of surviving what no living thing should ever endure alone. One evening, long after visiting hours ended, Jenna knelt beside the enclosure. Her voice was low, barely above a whisper. We're so sorry you had to be strong alone. Ember stood, no longer the broken figure pulled from ash, but something whole. Not healed, but healing. He looked at her, and with a slow, almost imperceptible exhale, let out a soft, rumbling chuff. It wasn't approval, it wasn't forgiveness. It was grace.